There you go, sir. And let's keep it going. Please welcome Jessica Chastain! Jessica Chastain, everybody! Please welcome the master of magnetism himself, Michael Fassbender! And now the leader of the X-Men, will you please welcome James McAvoy! And last but not least, the Dark Phoenix herself, will you please welcome Sophie Turner! Well, thanks for coming, everyone. We'll see you next time. All right. Oh, wow. They did not allow for my frame when they made these seats. Simon, we're going to start with you. And you have been a writer on these movies. You've been a producer on these movies, along with Hutch Parker, who is also here tonight. Hutch Parker's in the audience somewhere. Where are you, Hutch?
Where are you, Hutch?
Where are you, Hutch?
Do 10 pull-ups.
Give it up for Hutch Parker. And now, of course, you are progressing to the director's chair. Was this an inevitable step for you?
I don't know if it was inevitable, but it was something I always wanted to do in my career. And being the writer-producer of these movies for as long as I have been, and working with some directors who've been very collaborative and open and allowed me into the process of working with the actors. It felt like a very natural progression at the end of Apocalypse when we knew Bryan Singer was not going to direct the next movie. It was certainly on my mind that I would have a chance potentially to direct the next one, and I wanted to make sure it was something I loved. And my favorite story growing up, someone that grew up reading X-Men comics, was the Dark Phoenix story. And so I felt like this was the chance of a lifetime to tell the story of a lifetime, and so I campaigned for it, and they let me do it.
Is it true that you sat down to write the screenplay going, well, if this doesn't turn out, I may not direct it?
I don't know if I was that cavalier about it, but I definitely, wanted to make sure that I was writing something that I felt uniquely suited to directing, and that I felt like I had a vision for, and a clarity of vision for, and that I couldn't imagine handing over to another director. That's kind of the test, I think, for a director, that you can't imagine anyone else directing it. It's sort of like you can't hand your baby over. And this was one that, as I started conceiving it, even before I was writing it, I just could feel it, and I could feel the tone of it. I could see it visually, and that was different for me than I had felt on other screenplays.
Fantastic. And Jessica, you are a newcomer to this series, and you play a very mysterious character about which we can say very little, but you did base her on someone very interesting, didn't you?
Yeah. Two very interesting
Two very
people.
okay.
Tilda Swinton
Yeah.
and Robert Patrick from Terminator 2.
Talk me through that. How does that happen?
I had to play. I'm playing an otherworldly character, not based in the comics. It's a creation from the mind of this man right here, Simon Hedrick. And so she, shapeshifts to be human, but I wanted her to also be kind of an elevated form of humanity. And the only person I could think of, there's a lot of people I can think about like that. But at the top of that elevated form, it's a compliment. Is Tilda Swinton, because I'm not even convinced she's human. She could be like some goddess, ruling over a planet somewhere. So her, and then Terminator 2, because there was something so, I thought, unnerving about how emotionless he was. And there wasn't any kind of frenetic energy. It was just this slow moving machine. And my character is someone who believes that emotions make you weak. and I thought that would be interesting.
It's fantastic. And Michael, we'll move on to Eric, and Eric returns in this movie, and it's been quite the journey for him. Vengeful killer in First Class, prisoner in Days of Future Past, grieving husband and father in Apocalypse. Where is he now?
I watched Wild Wild Country, and I thought he would be kind of like the Bhagwan. I don't know if you guys have seen that. If not, it's an interesting documentary. I remember actually when the guy landed in Ireland when I was younger in Shannon, there was a whole controversy. Anyway, I called up Simon at the time. I was like, I think I see him as like this sort of cult leader, sort of guru, and I was thinking maybe I could wear those sort of like robes and maybe sort of beads. And kind of like a Colonel Kurtz sort of type guy. And Simon was like, yeah, I could hear the fear. But yeah, that was kind of the starting point for him. It's interesting with Eric, because he always tries to get out, he's trying to,
He's tried real hard.
and it's just not meant to be.
It's just not. Yeah, he's got that part of him he just can't deny.
He's got to be in the fight, So we find him here, and it's like the best sort of the most content you can find him. Obviously, when he had his family, it was different, but he's very much a sort of loner type character, and in a way, Charles is his best friend, or maybe even his only friend, the way I see it. So he set up Kenosha. It's a place where mutants can actually exist in harmony and safety and without persecution. They write their own laws. They're governed by their own people. But once he finds out the death of his friend, that's something that is very black and white. He goes immediately Old Testament, and it's an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and it's very clear for him that he doesn't have a choice.
Absolutely. And James, likewise, this is your fourth turn now as Charles. And this movie, without giving anything away, we see a very different side of Charles Xavier, don't we?
Yeah, I think we've seen him as, I suppose, just a kid, really, a selfish student, a kind of relatively vain student. And we saw him as a sort of broken drug addict and junkie kind of figure that had to kind of find the hero inside himself. and then that was M People. Was that M People?
That was it, people.
Yeah, mutant people.
Singing it all day.
Is that how you do it at karaoke?
Huh?
Is that how you do it at karaoke?
That's how I get into character, man. And then what else happened? Oh yeah, then he was like a teacher in Apocalypse, which we don't talk about. And then and I guess this is the first time we've seen him be a politician with a huge platform on the geopolitical stage, and he's slinging his message that he's always been slinging, which is that of integration. And it's a really positive and it's a brilliant message, but really he should be applying that message at home and to the people he's responsible for. And I think he's sort of lost track of things a little bit, and he believes his own press, But I've got to say this, no word of a lie. We were talking at lunchtime about a Tilda Swinton-esque quality that we saw in the film that from you. This is crazy. So when you said that, we were like, holy shit.
Fantastic. And Sophie, Jean has quite the journey in this movie. How did you find a way into what she's going through? What conversations did you have with Simon about shaping Jean in this movie?
Well, I mean, about 6 months before we started shooting the movie, Simon and I kind of sat down and talked about what this movie would entail and how emotionally tasking it would be, but also how this movie was going to be different from any other X-Men. It was going to be very character-driven and emotional and grounded, and so even though these kind of fantastical things are happening to her, this Phoenix Force inside of her is kind of making her a very conflicted, frustrated, disorientated, powerful, out of control person. We wanted to ground it in something that would really resonate with the audience, and her symptoms of what she was going through was not unlike schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, and addiction. And so that is what we studied to kind of get into this character. And I think it helped.
And when you signed on, when you took on this role, did you know / hope that this might be where Jean goes ultimately?
No, I had no idea. I mean, well, the screen test for Apocalypse we did a scene talking about the car crash, but I just figured, you know, we'd already done it in the Last Stand, and I would never get a chance to kind of play out that dark. Why are you laughing?
She loves a car crash.
Car crash. So I never really thought I'd get the opportunity to do it, but here we are, and it's wonderful.
Fantastic. Simon, you were planting seeds even back then, I guess, were you, for Gene? Apocalypse?
Even before Apocalypse, actually. I mean, Days of Future Past, I was planting seeds for the possibility of doing the Dark Phoenix story in a more proper way than had been attempted in Last Stand, which also we don't talk about.
I'm really intrigued.
Listen, guys,
Everyone's laughing.
we're batting pretty good. We're like 3 out of 5. So in Days of Future Past, obviously in resetting the timeline at the end of the movie, it allowed for the possibility of retelling, I guess you should say, or telling the Dark Phoenix story. And so I had that in mind at the end of Days of Future Past, knowing we would then have to create and establish a new Jean, which we did in Apocalypse, and then we tease a little bit of the force that she has, but it's not the Phoenix Force, obviously, at the end of Apocalypse. But yeah, I mean, Days of Future Past for me was about allowing for the possibility, logically, timeline-wise, of telling the Dark Phoenix story.
And one last question for everybody before our cast leave the stage and Simon stays here to talk about the clips you're about to see. What does this franchise now, this series, which has been going for nearly 20 years, what does it mean to you? Not just as people who are in it, obviously, but as fans, first and foremost. Sophie, let's start with you.
Well, it's just a huge legacy that these movies carry. And one of the things that I love the most about the X-Men movies and the comics that I've always loved is the message that, you know, what makes you unique is what makes you special. And that's something that I could always get behind. You know, these X-Men were always kind of ostracized and segregated and discriminated against. And then, you know, they found their people and they realized their strengths, and that really empowered them. And that's something that I've just always loved so much about these movies. So, yeah.
So that's that. That's it.
I think that quite often superhero movies, I love them in all their guises, but they're always truly exceptional people, and that's not to say that the X-Men or the characters within the X-Men aren't exceptional in their own right, but they're always really sort of lofty, and not always, but quite often really lofty and far away and sort of truly exceptional and really different and really other and almost alien and just like superstars. And I think the thing that I like about the X-Men is that they're mainly speaking, apart from you and sometimes me, they're apart from every X-Man who's on stage, they're only moderately powered, you know. Plus, they're all flawed and they're all scared, and they all come from some kind of trauma or some kind of tragedy. They come from some kind of segregation, some kind of oppression, some kind of ghettoization, and I feel like they represent the viewer maybe more closely than some of the other superheroes do. I'm not dissing other superheroes, I love those other superheroes. But I think what I love particularly about these ones is that the people in them feel more like us. They feel more human. They feel more like to get up off their sofa and go save the world, it's a big deal because they're not that great, you know? You know what I mean though?
Michael, you can feel free to diss other superheroes if you want.
Yeah. Here we go. No, I just like wearing a helmet and a cape and getting paid. No, I mean, to be honest, it's really changed my life. No, it did. You know, back in 2010, you know, I had the opportunity to enter into this franchise, and I wasn't hugely sort of familiar with it, to be honest. I never really read anything when I was a child. My dad would always like, but comics, everyone reads comics, read comic books, but I never really did. But when I started to, you know, when First Class landed in my lap and I was sort of reading it, and I just thought, wow, this is so sophisticated. The relationships were so contradictory, and the characters had real history and a lot to sort of mine from. And yes, like these guys were saying, you know, it's a supernatural sort of world, but at the core of it, it's very human. And you know, it's not a coincidence